As we continue our study with the Sermon on the Mount, we come across one of those important words again, dikaiosune, a word we've already looked at. And as Jesus really starts to get into his stride in this sermon, he starts to talk about a greater righteousness. So today we look at just that. This is the Sermon on the Mount and the greater righteousness. As we look at Matthew chapter 5, verses 19 and 20, we notice two really key phrases of the Sermon on the Mount coming back. First of all, kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is mentioned 3 times in these 2 verses. And if you remember back to our previous videos, the kingdom of heaven is kind of that place where God dwells and people follow his rule. They acknowledge his presence, they acknowledge his authority in what they do. And then the other word we see here is dikaiosune, righteousness. This idea of wholeness and completion makes a return. And what's really at stake here in these verses is, what does it mean to be in the kingdom of God? What is the standard of entry into the kingdom? How can we enter this realm where God's love and mercy and justice reign above all things in our lives? And Jesus in verse 20 makes what is probably one of the boldest statements in the Sermon on the Mount. He says, unless your righteousness, dikaiosune, exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. That is a bold and astonishing statement. Why? Because the scribes and the Pharisees were like the super most extra holy, uber righteous people in the first century. They were wandering experts in the law of the Lord. They had not just the written Torah, but an oral Torah built up that was a way of making sure you didn't accidentally fall foul of the Lord. They were the people who were the utmost experts on righteous living. And here is Jesus saying that unless your wholeness, your completeness goes beyond them, you are not fit to enter the kingdom of heaven. You are not fit to enter the place where God is reigning in people's hearts. See, here's the thing about dikaiosune and wholeness and completeness. Jesus is rooting his idea of righteousness in kind of a concept of greater righteousness. A greater righteousness that can only be fulfilled through the fulfilled law in Jesus Christ. Through the law, through the Torah, through that story being brought to completion in him. It's only in Jesus, in the completion of the entire redemption narrative, that we find the ability to come to complete wholeness. The dikaiosune for Jesus is rooted in Jesus. Notice again, Jesus is not messing around with his authority here. He's saying, the greater righteousness is rooted in me, he says. I am the fulfillment of Torah. I am the stories it has been pointing together. And if you want greater righteousness, you don't listen to the scribes and the Pharisees. They may well be the most holy people in the land, but ultimately the law they are commentating on, the law they are instructing you in, is incomplete. It is unfulfilled. It is partial. And Jesus says it's only in following me the greater righteousness can happen. I am here to teach you guys about the fulfilled law, how to achieve a righteousness that's greater than the incomplete law could ever tell you. This is a bold, sweeping statement, and it's statements like this that are really going to get him into authority with the religious elite in Israel. It's questions like this that are going to bring up charges of blasphemy against him. But for us, it's a reminder that true wholeness, completeness is only found in the person of Jesus Christ. It's only in pursuing Jesus that we can achieve the greater righteousness. Even if we were to closely follow the Old Testament as much as we could, we're only ever following an incomplete revelation of God. We're only looking at the first drafts, at the things that point us to Jesus. So we'll never quite fully get there in the same way that we can with Jesus. So how do we achieve greater righteousness? Jesus. What does that mean? It means when we pursue Jesus, we can enter into the kingdom of heaven. Our lives can become subject to the rule of God. We can know his love, his peace, his hope, his steadfastness, his beauty in its fullness. We can experience a heaven and a life that endures beyond this world. Because in Jesus, we have become complete and whole in a way we never could without him and the fulfilled law.